Hey everybody, Slay here. Tonight I'm going to do kind of a departure from my normal videos where I'm going to show you some gameplay. We're going to talk about something that is very apparent in this game and you're going to find in every single line that you play, well at least most lines, and that is the rotten apples. Um, every line that I've played so far has had at least one plane where I'm like, you know what, this plane either A, feels like a departure from this line, or B, just does not feel like it fits at all, and it is just a terrible plane to play. Um, One thing I noticed when I was playing tonight, I was playing with a Soulcat from HFAR, and he just happened to be in his 109F, and you know what? That is a terrible plane. You could take a great player, and you could put him in a terrible plane, and he's not going to have the greatest games because the plane is just terrible and there's only so much you can do in it. Whether it is a slow turner, whether it has weak guns, whether it is just slow. There are some planes out there that are just unredeemably bad, and I would like to just raise some awareness. So if you are grinding the line, so you can make a conscious decision to possibly skip it through free XP, or just, grit your teeth and get ready to bear some pain, and just know that, after some of these bad apples in the lines, it does get better. That is most lines, at least. There are some bad tier 10s. They make no exception. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at the tech tree. I'm going to go through each line, at least the ones that I've grinded up so far. I'm going to kind of share with you my experiences and why I feel some of these planes are just absolutely not that good for the line, or why the line itself does not really feel good until you get to a certain tier. So starting off, the American fighters, and this is a huge controversial line. In history, they were amazing, obviously, but in this game, they just really aren't until you get to the F-86. Now, why do I say the F-86? It's because it's the jack of all trades. The F-86 has speed, it has maneuverability, it has altitude, it can stick on a target, and its 650s, yes, they're weak, and yes, they take a long time to kill things, but when you can't lose a F-86 that's on your tail, those 650s are going to make quick work of you. But let's go into why that the rest of the line doesn't feel that great. So the P-20, starting with the tier 2 through 5, the line just feels generally weaker to the rest of the other planes out there. The P-23 at tier 2 just doesn't feel like it holds up to, let's just say, the AR-68 from Germany. The tier 3 doesn't feel as good as an I-16. The tier 4 doesn't feel as good as an A6M1. One thing it does lack, or this whole line lacks until you get to a certain point, is maneuverability. You're talking a tier 4 with 11 when you have the Japanese A6M1 doing a 7 turn. And yes, you get 650s on your tier 5, but when you're facing planes like the SE-100 with 420s, or the Hurricane 2 with 420s, both those planes at tier are going to just shred a P-40. You're not going to outturn them. Yeah, the Hurricane 2, I believe, has a similar turn rate to the P-40, but by the time you get shot at with 420s, you're just going to get absolutely shredded. So moving on. P-51A, I would highlight that as a rotten apple. It was bad enough that you have to grind through this P-40, but once you get to the P-51, you just completely realize that this is not a good plane. It is a tier 6. It's got 650s just like the P-40, but here's the problem. And let me go pull up the plane real quick. So you see these 650s that are on the P-40? They do 38 DPS, 700 rate of fire, 500 range. Let's take a look at the P-51. You gain you gain just about 10 DPS on the machine guns, slightly more range, slightly more rate of fire. They just do not hold up to any other tier 6 plane out there. They just generally feel weak. The same goes with the tier 7 until you get the final guns. Once you get the final guns on the tier 7, it feels okay, but it feels like a completely weak plane. I wouldn't call it a rotten apple because I actually had some great games in my P-51D. But compared to other tier 7 planes, such as the A7M, I know I'm highlighting the Japanese planes a lot here, but that is mainly because their line completely dominates tier 7 and below. But compared to like the I-220, the A7M, the Ki 84, those are just some planes I can think of off the top of my head that I would rather fly than a P-51D. And there's a reason I don't have any P-51s in my hangar anymore. So with that said, the P-51H, the Tier 8, is actually a keeper. The only reason I sold it is because I had to get some credits to purchase a different plane. But the P-51H I would keep. The P-51H, the 50s on it are actually decent. And it starts to feel kind of like a F-86 of Tier 8. Yes, you're not fast. Yes, you're not maneuverable, but you're just very average. And I've had some amazing games in my P-51H, so I wouldn't call it a rotten apple by any means. That is until you get to the FJ1. So you see the trend here with this line? You got bad, 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 okay, decent, okay, semi-decent, and then you get the FJ1. There's a reason this thing is absolutely the butt of all jokes at Tier 9, and that is because it is not a good plane by any means. At Tier 9, having the 650s, it just does not feel good. I know the F-86 has similar 50s, if not the same, but the FJ1 is just not a good plane compared to many planes out there. The Tier 9 German fighters, for example, the Spit 14, that Tier 8 even feels better than an FJ1 Fury. There's just so many planes out there that feel better than the FJ1 Fury. That's why I definitely call this plane a rotten apple. But I'm telling you guys right now, stick with it. The F-86 is a glorious plane. It was an icon in history, and it's definitely one of the stronger Tier 10, in my opinion, of this game. It's definitely top 4 fighters. So moving on, going from the P-40, I went over to the P-38, and I did not have a good time with the P-38F. It wasn't until I got to the P-38J that I have anywhere of a decent time. And the reason being is, and as you can see, I never even got to the end cannon, but I'm being told that's when this plane gets really good. But as you can see, I played only very few games in both these planes. I did not unlock the 37, and it was just because I didn't really get attached to a plane. I didn't really like it enough. What ended up happening was I flew this plane probably for about 7 or 8 sorties, and I turned around and went down the multi-roll line, and I had actually decent games with the F2F, F3F. Those are decent planes. The F2A is alright. The F4F, meh. The F4F, again, at Tier 5, you're facing SE-100s, you're facing Hurricanes, but it felt like an okay plane. The Corsair, you know, was actually really amazing with its 420s. Really fun plane to play. And I used that to cross over to the F7F, which I would call, if I'm going to call anything the rotten apple, I know some people are going to disagree with me here, but I'm going to have to say the F7F was definitely a rotten apple to me. It just feels so slow and lumbering, and you don't really know what the purpose of the plane is. Are you supposed to be a fast heavy fighter? Are you supposed to be a strong, strong gun plane? You just really don't know. And if you'll look, I free speed through most of the plane. After I got through it, you got 420s and 450s, sure, but it just lacks in maneuverability. It lacks in speed. Look at that speed at Tier 7. This is a Tier 7 heavy, mind you. 680. That's pretty much a joke at Tier 7. It's got low altitude. It's got lower altitude than than the high altitude Tier 7 fighters. So you don't really know where you're sitting with this plane. You don't know if you're supposed to play high altitude. You don't know if you're supposed to have decent turning, which you're in a heavy. I wouldn't expect decent turning at all. But the firepower, yes, it's got 420s and 450s, but it just feels lacking. It's got one 1,000 pound bomb, which is okay. But then obviously you get to the Pancake, the F2H, and the XF90, and I will have to say that was worth the grind. Whether you go through the P38s and the F7, or whether you go through the Corsair line, you need to take a departure and go down to the Pancake. If anything, the Pancake alone, if you stop there, you're not doing anything wrong. The Pancake is single-handedly the best Tier 8 plane in the game. And I could say that wholeheartedly, knowing how many good Tier 8 planes there are out there. Just because the Pancake's the most overpowered plane Doesn't mean that there isn't planes that are out there that aren't fun and aren't good. But I can wholeheartedly say no other plane performs like the XF5U, the Pancake. It's just disgusting to play. You talk about meta, this is the meta. The F2H and the XF90, like I said, they're both amazing planes. The F2H actually gets speed, and the XF90 is obviously one of the fastest planes in the game. But the XF90, look at the speed at tier 9. You got 920, and then obviously, sorry, that was the F2H. Then you get down to XF90 at 1100. So these planes, this is where they really start to feel amazing, and these feel like a heavy fighter. The XF5U just feels like a UFO. Alright, so moving back to the multi-role line. So as for sour apples in this line, I would say the F4F wasn't great. It started getting better once you get to the Corsairs, and the F94 is just absolutely amazing once you get the Vulcan. Such a good plane. I cannot recommend it enough. Unfortunately, you spend enough time in it, you're going to unlock the F7U. And I just have not had any good games in this F7U. I've been told numerous times that it's one of the worst tier 10s out there, and I'd have to agree. It is just not an interesting plane. If they would have taken the Vulcan from the F94 and put it on the F7U, even if they kept the same gun, it would feel fine, in my opinion. But it's got these 420s, which are decent, but they're not great. It's got crappy handling. Again, pretty crappy altitude. It is fast on paper, but when you're playing it, you just don't feel fast. And I don't know if that's because you're lumbered down by 500-pound bombs. It just doesn't feel fast when you're playing the plane. So I can't really recommend the F7U. If I was going to choose a couple rotten apples from this whole line right here, I would have to say at tier 5 the line feels pretty weak, and at tier 10 it feels weak. As you see, I did not go down the other multi-role line, but I really want to, as that tier 10, the F84F, just looks amazing. It's got the armament of a GA, and it's got the turn of a fighter, so that looks pretty fun to play, and I can't wait to unlock that one day. So that's how I feel about the Americans. The Americans in general, the only planes of note that I've kept from the American line is the Pancake, the XF90, and the F94, and the F86. All the other planes from the American line I've gotten rid of. I just don't enjoy them as much as I do other nations' lines. Other people might feel differently, and you know what, to each their own. Everybody's got an opinion, and that's why opinions are so great. But as for the Americans, I just think there's, again, 4 planes that completely stick out. Well, 5 if you're counting the F2H, but I only chose 4 to keep just because I don't have time to play an F2H when I'm playing, an F94. If I want that kind of gameplay, I'm just going to play an F94 or a different plane. But anyways, moving on. So to the Russians. See the amount of planes that we're looking at here? Look at the Americans, and then look at the Russians. Quite a bit of planes here. No Russian bias at all through wargaming, through any of their games really. So starting with the fighter line, and which really starts with the multi-rolls. Well, most planes start with the multi-roll. The I-5, absolutely amazing. Can't call it a rotten tomato at all. The I-15 continues to be amazing. I-16s are both amazing. Lag 3 is actually a pretty decent plane. Let's go into why. So the Lag 3, you have a 23 and a 50 at tier 5 with 9 maneuverability. That 23, from what I'm being told, actually feels pretty decent. The LA5, again, I skipped right past the LA5 because it's got 320s at tier 6, and I've been told that it's not the greatest. The LA7, on the other hand, starts to get better. It's got 323s. The LA9 was one of my favorite planes at tier 8. It's got a rocket boost. And then you get this plane. This is the LA160. Again, another tier 9 sour apple. This, to me, just took such a departure from the whole line. Yes, it's got similar turn. Yes, it's got similar altitude capabilities. But I really felt that the 23s, stock 23s, felt better than the 30s. and some people might call me crazy here, but these 30s that are here, the SH330s, I just couldn't get into them. And then thankfully, once you get the LA-15, you get your 23s back. 23s feel like the American 20s. They fire for a long time. They don't overheat that much. They really are good guns. So if I'm going to choose a raw apple that really stuck out to me in this whole fighter line in the Russians, well, the first fighter line at least, because they have 3 lines, I would have to choose the LA-160 for this line right here. Obviously, I haven't gone down the multi-roll. One day I will. Um, I have heard nothing bad about the Su-9, the 211, 215. Really, I've heard nothing bad about them. The 9U, I've been one-shot by that thing so many times. I know it's OP. I mean, let's just take a look at the 9U real quick. The 9U gets a 45 and 220s. You put that thing at tier 6, or sorry, with tier 7 with a 45 and 220s, you're gonna just absolutely just get some meme games with it. Moving on to the other fighters. So for this whole line, the second Russian line, it's really a great line. The I-17 is a great plane. The Yak-1 is probably where I felt like it was pretty weak. You get 120 and 150 in the Yak-1, but luckily that's rectified with the Yak-1M. You get 250s at least and a 20. But if I'm going to choose a sour apple for this whole line, I would have to say it's going to be the Yak-1, because everything after the Yak-1 is absolutely amazing. They all maintain that 8 turn. They all get some amazing cannons. The Yak-15 and the Yak-19. The Yak-19 is arguably one of the best tier 9s, if not the best. And the Yak-30, pound for pound, you're not going to really match its turning. It is arguably one of the best, if not the best, turn fighters at tier 10. So if I'm going to choose a sour apple for that line, again, it's going to be the Yak-1. So moving on, and when people play this MiG line, we'll just call it the MiG line, even though there's only 3 planes in it called a MiG. The MiG line, there is one plane that arguably sticks out to everybody, and that is the I-210. The I-210 is just a complete piece of garbage, and that's putting it gently. The MiG-3 has a ton of machine guns. You got 350s and 2 7.62s. And then you get to the 210. You got 220s. That's it. 220s. That, oh, by the way, overheat completely too fast. So you have 2 very fast overheating 20s, no machine guns to assist you in any way. And it just makes for a terrible plane. And then you move on to the 220 at tier 7. This plane is absolutely amazing. It's got a high altitude, decent turn, 420s. So you double your armament going from tier 6 to tier 7. More than double. I mean, look at that there. You have 9 armament. 9 armament moves on to 22. That should speak for itself. The 210 just sucks. If I'm going to choose a rotten apple there, it's going to be that. I have unlocked the 250. I have not purchased it yet. I'm being told that the 250, the problem with it is it's fast, and that's great, but it just sucks at turning, which it does. It's got 11 turn, and the guns and durability are not that great. But for the most part, I have not gone down the rest of the line, so I'll refrain from commenting on it. I've heard good things about the MiG-15 and the MiG-9, but I'm going to leave that there. I used the 220 to move on to the IL-10. I actually grinded down through the IL-10 all the way to the 40p before I even played the lower tier Russian GAs. And there was a reason for that. I'm glad I went the IL-10. It was an amazing plane. The IL-20 is amazing. 40 is amazing. 40p, absolutely amazing. I played a few games low tier in the TSH. I did not have a good time. I didn't have a good time in pretty much anything until I got to the IL-2. Once I got the IL-2, and more specifically, once I got the IL-2 and the 237s, then I really felt like I was playing a GA, and I was there to do a ton of damage. I have not got the IL-8 yet, or the IL-2T. I have not purchased it yet. I've heard the 2T is not bad. I believe you lose your... No, you keep the 37s on the 2T. They are different though, so you have to regrind them. But for the most part, what I've heard about the 2T is mostly like the Tier 5. So I mean, it can't be that bad of a plane. But if you're going to do anything and you want a fast track to the IL-40, I would recommend going through the MiG line, go through your I-220, straight through the IL-10 and down. You're just going to have a really rough time, and it's going to be kind of boring, to be honest with you, to play through all these planes, you know, and to get to the IL-40, because they are much of the same. So moving on, that is the Russians, guys. For the Russians, I kept the LA-15, the Yak-30, the IL-10, the I-220, and pretty much everything Tier 8 and above in the ground attacker line, the 20, the 40, and the 40P. And obviously I kept my premium planes too, but I'm not counting premium planes here. Oh, I kept the I-17, I-16, I&E, and the I-5. I-5 is just an amazing seal clubbing plane. If you ever get a chance to play it, you won't have any issues playing that plane by any means. It's got 4 machine guns at Tier 1. What more can I say? The I-16 and the I-16 I and E, I kept those just for multi-role planes if I had missions and whatnot to knock out with the low-tier multi-roles. So moving on to Germany. Germany was one of the first lines that I got my first multi-role in. So let's start with the multi-role line. The multi-role line starts with the fighters. The HE-51's not a bad plane. The Focke-Wulf 159 is not bad at all by any means. It's Tier 3. It gets, I believe, 120? Yeah, it gets a single 20 and 2 machine guns on it, so it's not a bad plane by any means. And it was actually pretty dang maneuverable. Yeah, 9 maneuverability at Tier 3, which was decent. Then you move on to the HE. The HE, again, keeps 9. It's got 2 20s and 2 machine guns. It should feel good. I don't know what it was about this plane, but compared to A6M1s, compared to other Tier 4s out there, I did not have a good time in this plane. Not by any means. And unfortunately, it kept the same path through the A1 and the A5. I had such a bad time with the A1 and A5 that I actually skipped the 190D, which I'm kind of sad that I did because I heard the 190D was a decent plane. But if you look at the 190A1, let's just take a look at this plane. I don't know what this plane's trying to be. It's low out, horrible turning, it's slow. It's got great armament. It's got 4 machine guns and 2 20s. It's got a great armament. Unfortunately, it only has 4 bombs. Starts to feel a little bit better once you get the A5 because you get rockets, but you only get 2 rockets. Has 4 20s instead and 2 machine guns. So it starts to feel a little bit better at the Tier 6, but you're maintaining that same crappy handling. And when you're fighting against things like the A6M5, the SC-100, the Hurricane 2, there's so many planes out there that are just going to dominate you if you're in any of those planes. And it just makes for a terrible experience, which is unfortunate because once you get to I don't want to say Tier 8 because I'm gonna explain to you a little bit about these BVP lines. So going from the Focke-Wulf line to the BVP, it feels like you're getting into UFO territory here. BVP, great plane. The only problem with it, it's got weak armament, super weak armament. You're talking 2 20s on a Tier 8 that overheat at a decent rate. I mean, it is the only strong point again with this line is once you get into these UFOs, you start getting rockets, and the rockets are amazing. But the machine guns are just absolutely too terrible with this plane for its tier. But then you get to the Tier 9. Beautiful plane. The BVP 212, I just did a video on it. I've done probably multiple videos on it now. It really starts to feel right. It has the same 24 rockets. I want to say same turn. Yeah, same turn, same rate of roll. It's the same airframe, really. But then you get three 20s, and you are faster. Look at that speed. It goes from 750 to 915. It's a huge increase in speed. But you get more guns. You just feel tons more nimble. Then unfortunately you get to the Tier 10. I would say this is the second worst Tier 10 in the game. You go from a 10 turn time to a 14 turn time. You don't really gain anything in speed. You go from 915 to 960. You get one more machine gun, a shit ton more rockets, and you get some air-to-ground rockets, and you get 213s for your rear gun, which off and on they can work. But this thing just does not feel strong, not by any means. At 840 hit points, you just feel like you're getting shredded. You can't do anything once anything gets on your tail, other than just jump into your turret, hit that pitch up key, and just pray. So if I'm going to talk sour apples for this line, I would have to say pretty much everything. I did not enjoy it. And I can't really speak for the 190D because I didn't play it. But I've heard it's an okay plane. But I'm going to, hands down, say right now that the HE, the 198.1, and the 198.5 were just not fun to play. The BVP 210, while it starts to feel good, just wasn't that interesting to play. Just felt pretty weak. And the 215, with all the other tier 10s that are out there, I have no reason to play the 215, and I'm going to explain it when I get over here to the German fighter line. So moving on, I've only gone two parts of this first fighter line of the Germans, the TA-152 and the TA-183. The TA-152 is arguably one of the best snipers, if not the best sniper in the game. It's got 330s that just shoot like super lasers, and it's on a platform that can turn. It's a high altitude platform. It's got a decent turn. I believe it had 11 turn, 2500 altitude, decent climb, decent speed, but these guns are just sick on it. The 103s are just really, really amazing. Then you get to the TA-183, and a lot of people, some things they say about this plane, a lot of people don't like it. Me, because I played the GA and because I did a lot of dogfighting in my German GAs, I actually like this plane because to me it just felt fine. Yeah, it's got crappy maneuverability, but those 30s are the same 30s that are on the Tier 8 GA. So you're talking, if you get close with this plane, it is absolutely a ton of fun. And with that said, the Focke-Wulf 252 gets the same 30s that the ME262 HG line gets and the Tier 10 German GA gets. And those 30s are amazing. Those 30s are absolutely amazing. So I can't wait to one day get this plane and try it out. I've heard mixed reviews on it. So moving on to the third fighter line that the Germans have. If you'll see here, I did not go to the AR-80 or the 109B. The AR-68 is a great plane. It's not bad at all for what it is. It's actually super maneuverable for a Tier 2. I went from the HE to the 109E, which was an okay plane. But then you get to the F, and I don't know if you remember the beginning of my video, if you're still here. Sol was playing his 109F, and it just reminded me that you just have crappy firepower on that plane. And it feels like a decent plane, but you just don't have the guns to put anything down. Thankfully, that's all fixed once you get to the Gustav. The 109G is an amazing plane. I pretty much skipped right through it because I had such a bad time with the 109F. But it gets a 30 and 213s, and I've heard nothing but great things about it. And that takes you to the 209A. And I don't know why, but I just could not get into this plane. The more that I played it, the more that I couldn't get into it. And maybe it was because it is nothing but cannons, but I play a lot of planes that are nothing but cannons, so I can't explain why I did not get into this plane. The 30 and the 20s just do not line up by any means. You're firing your 20, that 30 overheats after like 5 shots, and those 20s overheat like a couple seconds later. It feels like your 20s just go straight, and your 30 will just be off, to left field or right field. Thankfully, that's all fixed once you get to the 1092 and the 1101. You get 420s. They are super laser accurate, and they are just absolutely amazing planes to play. So if you are going down the fighter line, your end game is going to be that 1101. Stick through it. I know the F and the 209A are just not the greatest, but there are some good planes in that line, and it's worth keeping. Now, if you look German heavies, I haven't gone down any of the German heavy line, unfortunately, because I know that some planes there are just absolutely amazing. When by amazing, I'm talking the 410, and I believe the later 262s. From what I've heard, are really, really amazing. But I can't really give any insight on the heavy fighters, so I'm not going to bother insulting your intelligence and talking about it. So moving on to the attack aircraft. The attack aircraft, this is a kind of sore subject with me, and that's being because I felt at tier 4, 5, and 6, the German attack aircraft are terrible. And actually at tier 7, I'm just going to throw it out there, the German attack aircraft, until you get to tier 8, are terrible. It isn't until you get to tier 8 with those 30s does those planes really start feeling great. And once you get to the 1099B2, again, completely feels amazing. There's even a meme cannon on the 1099B2 that you can mess around with. It's got a giant, I believe it's a 50? Yeah, it's a 50. That thing is pretty rock solid. It can laser snipe buildings from like a 1,000 away. It's really fun to play. And the 1102B, arguably the best 30s in the game. They're the same 30s that are on the 262 and the 252. Holy crap. Those 30s are just amazing. You could actually do a ton of GA killing, or just pretty much plane killing. If anybody's dumb enough to get in front of your guns, they're gonna die. So obviously out of these planes, I've kept a pretty decent amount of them actually. I kept my 212 and my 215. I kept the 215 just because I don't believe in selling a tier 10. Um, it's just me. You buy a tier 10 for 6,000 and then you turn around and you sell it for what, 3? It's just not worth it. I don't like just giving Wargaming back my credits that I earn. It's too much time. I will sell tier 9s only if I need credits. Tier 8s, again, only if I need credits. And everything else before that, I don't mind selling. But tier 10, I just don't feel like it's worth selling ever, because they could rebalance those tier 10s. And if you ever want to buy it again, you're talking a ton of credit grinding just to get something you already had. So again, I kept the 212, the 215. I kept the TA-152 and the 183. And depending on how the 252 goes and the 252, I may or may not be selling my 183 just because I don't play it enough, especially when I have the 1092. I don't feel I need that fighter. It's too shotgunny for me, but I'm hoping the 252 fixes that. But I obviously kept my 1092 and 1101, and I kept my 1099B2 and my 1102B. I used to maintain and keep the 329, the tier 8 German GA, but I got rid of it just because when it came to tier 8, I'd rather play my IL-10M or my IL-20 before playing the German GA. Moving on. Oh, this line. Both these lines. I could look at this line and I see literally only one sour apple, and it's a plane I haven't even gone yet. I see one that's kind of questionable, but not bad. It's just questionable. So, without anything stopping me here, the key line. This key line is terribly fun to play. Everything was fun to play in the key line. Even up until where I'm at in the key 84. The only problem that I've heard with this line is everything after tier 7 just kind of doesn't feel that great from what I've heard. And let's look at why. So the tier 7, you got 230s and 220s on a tier 7 turn fighter. Absolutely a monster. Arguably probably the best plane tier for tier at tier 7. But then you get to the tier 8. It's got the same 20s and the same 30s, except it's on a tier 8. Yes, it's got decent turn and all that, but you just don't gain anything. You get slightly better airspeed and slightly better airframe as for hit points, but you don't gain anything firepower-wise, and it just feels weak from what I've heard. It just doesn't feel that great of a tier 8 plane. Tier 9, I heard you have to get used to the 30s, but once you do, I heard the 30s aren't bad. If you look here, they're moderate 30s. There's better 30s out there, obviously. So If any of you got the KI 162, either the 1 or the 3, please let me know. Post in the comments, say, hey, this has been my experience with it, blah, 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 blah. I want to hear. I really do. And if you know, don't agree with anything that I'm saying here, let me know as well. I'm always up for a discussion. But again, everything I'm telling you guys or have told you guys so far has been my personal experience, and that is all I have to go by. I am a relatively new player to the game. I'm not an old hat. I started playing pretty much the day 2.0 launched, and I've been playing ever since. I avoided this game. I was one of those creeps who played War Thunder. I had a generally great time in War Thunder, and from what I saw of this game pre 2.0, I wasn't really interested to make that cross. But once, you know, 2.0 dropped, I came along, and I have just had an amazing time. And the community here is so much better than War Thunder's community. War Thunder's community feels like World of Tanks community. It is super toxic. So coming here just feels really great. Moving on to the zero line. I haven't found any planes in the zero line that I don't like. And when I said something was questionable, I was talking about the A6M2. And that's only because the A6M2 just, again, like the tier 8 key, just kind of feels like more of the same. It doesn't feel like you get much gained by going up to the A6M2. You play the A6M1, you got the Model 1, and then you go the A6M2, just slightly better. But let's look at the DPS, 75 compared to 65, so you go up 10. Again, very minor changes here. But once you get to the A6M5, then you start seeing an absolute monster of a plane. DPS jumps up to 94, and you got 213.2 machine guns. So the A6M5, the A7, super fun planes to play. A6M1 and everything before it, amazing planes to play. I just never had any great games in my A6M2, again, because it just felt kind of mediocre. And lastly, with the J7 line here, I loved every bit of it. The J7 at W1, to some of you guys out there, is going to feel like a sour apple. Wait till you get the 30s. Once you get the 30s, these planes become absolutely terrors of the sky. And the tier 9 and the tier 10 are just some of the funnest planes in the game. I got rid of my tier 8 just because once I had the tier 9, it really felt like I had no reason to keep the tier 8. So of these lines, if you look, I've kept so many Japanese planes. As for tier 10, I have the J7W3, I kept the J7W2. I kept the Key 27 because at tier 3 that thing is absolutely amazing to play. I kept the Key 61 because it's an okay tier 6 fighter, although there are things that are better. I prefer the A6M5 over the Key 61 any day. Doesn't mean the Key 61 is a bad plane. Kept the Key 84, and I kept the A6M1, 2, 5, and A7 just because they're amazing planes to play. Even though I talk bad about the A6M2, I keep it just for shits and grins because you never know. Some days you're playing with your tier 5 friends and you just want that turn fighter, you're going to hop into an A6M2 and have some fun. So moving on, last but not least, I am not through these lines in the UKs, but I'm working on it. I really am. By working on it, I mean playing a plane that I enjoy terribly, and yeah. So with that said, the UK fighters, if you look here, I kept everything that has the name Spitfire in it. There's a reason they call them skill fires. These planes are absolutely so easy to play. I've heard nothing but good things about the 146 at tier 4, but holy crap, the Spitfire 1, 5, 9, and 14, and man, I'll tell you that 14 is so good, are just so fun to play. And I've heard the Attacker and the Swift are not terribly bad, but I haven't got them yet, so I'm not going to comment. Moving on to the multi-role, I didn't really care for the Demon or the Skua, not at all, to be honest with you. The Hurricane 1, again, didn't really care for it, because once you get the Hurricane 1, where it falls flat on its face, in my opinion, is its firepower. It's got 803, sounds like it's amazing. To be honest with you, it's not. Because once you get to the tier 5, with 420s that absolutely shred things. My best game was in this plane. It was during Skies of Albion. I was able to just sit there at a spawn and just farm planes. I ended up with like 27,000 combat points. Plane is amazing. Tornado takes the same amazing stuff at tier 5, takes it up to tier 6. Great plane. And it moves on to Spit 9. What more can you ask for? Moving on. The Beaufighter. So the Blenheim is meh. I wouldn't call it sour apple, but I would definitely say the Beaufighter and the Mosquito have been so much more fun than what the Blenheim was. The Beaufighter and the Mosquito are just amazing planes. I'll probably get rid of the Mosquito once I get the Hornet because I heard the Hornet's really good. I heard decent things about the 1056, but if you look here, I don't believe it gets the Aiden 30s. No, it gets 240s and 420s, which is a huge firepower. So I haven't heard anything terrible about the 1056, but I've heard nothing but good things about the 228. Because you get those 430s, those Aidens are just absolutely amazing from what I hear. And the Javelin, I haven't heard anything bad about it. It just takes more of the same from the 228 and takes it on to tier 10. But guys, that has been my experience so far with this game. I hope you guys can use some of my insight from the tiers that I've grinded, and you know, just be aware of some of the planes you're going to have to go through. Doesn't mean you should skip them entirely. Again, some people might do tons better than I ever was able to do in some of these planes. This F7U, again, I would say it's the worst tier 10, but some would say it's their favorite tier 10. It might be because they, they watched Top Gun one too many times, or it might be just because they actually like the plane. But it is what it is. Like, to each their own. Everybody's going to have a different opinion on the planes that are good or bad. I'm just trying to give everybody a good insight on what I've experienced and just preparing you mentally for what you're going to have to go through. All the tier 10s so far, the grind has been fun. Yes, I don't like the F7U, but if I would have never grinded to the F7U, I would have never found the F94. So I can't complain about grinding to the F7U. Same goes for the 215. If I didn't ever grind to the 215, I would have never found the 212, which is arguably some of my favorite planes to play on a daily basis. So grind out a line, pick where you're going, and just be aware after seeing this video. Hopefully you can be aware of just some of the planes that you're not going to have a great time in. Just know it gets better most of the time. Most of the time it gets better. But anyways, guys, this has been a pretty long video for me, 42 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and call it here. I hope you guys can use this to help you in making a decision when trying to go down the line. Again, don't take anything I say here as, the word of God. Anything I'm telling you, again, is my opinion, and just I'm speaking from experience here. So anyway, guys, thank you for watching. If you're still here, thank you for watching my videos. I absolutely love doing these videos, and I will continue to do them as much as I can, barring when I can. I do have a day job, I do have a family, but again, this is definitely my hobby and definitely something that I enjoy doing on a day-to-day basis. So I look forward to doing more. This video stemmed from a comment somebody made from one of my videos. He was just asking what to look out for, do a couple reviews on some bad planes. I hope this was able to help them. And again, guys, if you guys ever have a plane or anything that you want to see a review on, and you notice that I have it in my hangar, please, by any means, ask me to take it out, and I will do my best to do a decent video on it. I like doing the videos, and I'm here for you guys. So thanks for watching, and you guys have a good night.